More than anything, maintain the belief that like what's coming in the future could be better than you imagined, and don't discount yourself from anything before you've tried it. The more you put energy into what you're passionate about, eventually you can find success and find other people who are like-minded, who are trying to go where you're going. Everything tends to align once you align with what's really important to you and what you want to be doing and what lights you up. That doesn't mean every single day is going to be easy. It's not going to be like a yellow brick road to where you want to go. There'll still be challenges. But when you're in alignment with what is really important to you, as opposed to out of alignment, the difference is very palpable.
Welcome home to You Are the Compass with producer and host Jessye Clayton. This is a podcast about the turning points in life that awaken us to new directions and the inner guidance that helps us navigate them. Reset your headings as we dive deep with guest interviews, quick fine-tuned series, and inspiration from all corners of the globe. From wherever in the world you have joined from today, you have arrived. Hi, and welcome home to You Are the Compass, where we're about to ski our coordinates over to the slopes, delight in the healing power of the outdoors, and challenge our minds, our bodies, and really the outer world we face to climb just that little bit higher. Cue snow, get out your hiking boots, ready that cup of hot cocoa in the thermos, for I have with us two authors of a book that we'll go on a great adventure with today. I just feel so incredibly blessed to be sharing time with you both. Let's learn from the base up. From the bunny hill, the double diamonds, to far beyond what the hope is for the future, where those lines are all the more brighter and maybe even more beautiful than we ever dared to imagine. Rob and Ryan, welcome home to You Are the Compass.
Thank you so much for having us all the way. I'm in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Ryan's somewhere in New Hampshire, and you're a whole planet away. Pretty cool.
And I'm all the way in Oz. Ryan, I was searching through Podmatch for extreme sports enthusiast for my next episode. And well, honestly, I just couldn't go past this incredible story you have to share. It really called out to me, your childhood, your love for the outdoors. And then, Rob, I reached out to you and we started researching the book and the journey that you both had a hand in writing. Before we get into the pow, I would just like to thank you both so much for being here today. Where to begin? Brian, what was your first experience that you can remember of being outdoors?
Well, it's going to be kind of a lame answer because I have this like gift / curse of remembering everything in my life in like very vivid detail. So I remember things from when I was like 3. So it was probably just like being in my backyard. But I think the most like prominent experiences were either my first time skiing, which was like really like a pivotal event in my life, which I can remember every intimate detail of being out there on that day and just sort of the events that unfolded and like how important that was for my life moving forward. It's shaped everything since then. And also just lots of playing in the woods. I was always somebody who was driven to explore. I think when you're a kid, like the interests and the dreams you have are they never really leave you. They just evolve as you gain more tools to understand the world. And I was always driven to explore, whether it was my backyard or, the Arctic. I was either exploring on my feet or I was drawing pictures of, crazy places I wanted to explore one day.
I love that. Do you remember what age you were when you first tried skiing?
7.
7. That's quite a young age. I think it's we start to form memories that we remember. Certainly a lot of society and a lot of the adults out there that will only recall memories from the age of 5. And it has to be a very significant experience if you're remembering back, 3 and 4. Do you remember when you're out on the mountain and you were skiing like your first slope? What was it that you just said, this is for me? I feel calm, I feel noticed, I feel maybe even a bit grateful that I'm starting to get a skill that maybe wasn't admired in me earlier on.
I think it was a little bit of all of the above. I think skiing just kind of like matched all of the parts of my personality that maybe I didn't necessarily know that I had yet. I like to be challenged. I like to explore. I liked to be out in nature, but I didn't necessarily know all those things until I put a pair of skis on, and it just kind of satisfied all of those things immediately. Just the feeling of moving on snow, the feeling of challenging myself trying to ski down a steep slope, and I just like kind of had a weird natural talent for it. I didn't know this at a time, but skiing down, I was able to immediately make a turn and could like really stay balanced on my feet. And when I became an instructor years later, like most people's first day of skiing, we're just trying to get them to stand up on their feet. So I think a lot of people were impressed with that early on, and it was nice as a kid to feel encouraged for something, because I went through a lot of traumatic things as I was growing up, and I was used to adults, constantly telling me what I would never be.
So you were saying, you were making these turns, you're down on the slopes. What took it from there? Did you go back, after you were off the hill and you're 7 years old, did you go back to a life that maybe wasn't in the best interest at the moment, but it was all the information that you had at the time to work with?
At that time in my life, I at a pretty young age was kind of going off the rails a little bit. I was really struggling to learn in school, and I'd gotten moved to a therapeutic school. And at this therapeutic school, they kind of used detrimental methods of punishment. They used like really harsh physical restraints. I'd come home with bruises and rug burns from like essentially getting in these like wrestling matches with adults, often over really small things, tearing a piece of paper in half, not wanting to go into timeout. So my life as a kid up to that point was like pretty bad. I still had a lot of joy as a kid. I had friends, I played outside, made up games, but I really was denied the normal life a lot of kids got to have. So skiing was kind of the first glimmer of hope of like, wow, I could really have something special in my life. And, this could lead to a career. This could lead to great adventures. This could lead to great friendships. So for a long time, skiing was really like the only thing I had to hold on to. So I could get through anything during the week as long as on Saturday I got to go skiing.
I love that. But then and it's such a young age to have that. It's kind of like we're wishing our life away for the weekend. We go to these jobs or we go to school and we're like, oh, I can't wait to go out with my mates on the weekend, or I can't wait to go to the movies, go out in the outdoors and go hiking. And it's taking solace in the fact that we need to be doing this more and more in our everyday lives and taking passion in the small things. Rob, do you maybe remember like seeing Ryan out in the slopes and just thinking, wow, like how do I get to have that happiness, that passion, that focus in him every day?
You said a mouthful. I mean, if you would ask me, not how old was Ryan when he started skiing, what day did Ryan start skiing, I would tell you January 2nd, 2009. And the reason I can remember that day is because everything to that point had been so bad. And really, the decisions we made, vis-a-vis his education and some of the doctors that were, interjecting in his care really led us down the wrong path. But, that was our fault. I mean, really, we made those decisions. But when I look back, even as when he was a little kid, I lived in the city and we moved out to the suburbs and we had a really big backyard. I built this huge playground and I thought, this is the greatest thing a kid could ever want. Well, he never stayed on the playground. He was in the woods behind our house, going acres in and finding, the swamp and coming back with these tales with his friend of what they found. And, and I didn't even know where they were going and I didn't know what they were doing. But even then, he just wanted more. He wanted to see more than what the conventional yard offered. And when we got to skiing, to this point, he had spent his life hearing, no, Ryan, get down, Ryan, get off the fan, Ryan, get off the counter, Ryan, you can't do that. No. And even just, we don't laugh at some of his ideas. Like, no, of course you can't do that. You're 6, you're 5, you're 4, whatever. And finally we get to skiing and I had no expectations. Everything we had ever tried before this had ended badly. So I thought we were going to be there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe we'll make it 20. Maybe we'll get to the rental process. Maybe we'll get up one run. He's going to fall because everybody falls. And as soon as he falls, he's going to get frustrated and want to go home. And I'm preparing myself for that. Well, when none of that happened, because he never fell and because he just was so good at it so, early on, time went by so quickly that all of a sudden, 3 hours were gone. And when we finally got back in the car, it wasn't, yay, that was the greatest thing ever. I remember just thinking that wasn't bad. Like, I can't think of anything bad that happened. The light bulb sort of goes off. We should come back tomorrow. Let's go back tomorrow. And the next day. And then, we just went on this journey throughout New England to find these, what we would consider big mountains, but in the United States or the world, they would be considered smaller. And, with each one, he was just so good and so free and so happy. And the ski experience, I knew he was enjoying. I could see that. But it took me a while to realize this whole experience is good. We're driving together. We're riding chairlifts together. We're having lunch together. And home was so combustible and school was so awful that just to have this time when nobody was angry and there wasn't any, that doesn't mean it was perfect. We had some battles on the mountain, believe me, and mostly because I would get lost or he would leave me or, and I never knew where I was going and I wasn't very good. So I was falling myself and trying to keep up with him. But it was enjoyable. And there's something, and I was at that age where, I was never an outdoorsy guy. I played traditional team sports. I was, home watching, my team sports like every other dad. And I don't know, I'd have these moments where I'd be, looking around and saying, this is really beautiful. Like, this is pretty awesome. And I'm like, wait, this is serious. This is parenting. This is supposed to be hard. There were times when it was very great for me too. And I think together we had this experience where he was just enjoying himself. I was starting to really enjoy myself. We were starting to enjoy each other. And it was a really special time. It just sent us around the world, really. I mean, it was just, just lucky that we found it that day, January 2nd, 2009. But everything that followed after that was a lot different than what came before it.
I love that. And you're like sharing and teaching each other new skills. It's not like you had this whole career in the mountains where you're an alpinist and you knew all the beaners and the ropes and you brought Ryan out and you guys shared that together. It's like you learnt, even though your ages apart, you're a parental figure, you're the child, that you just shared that experience and you're growing your skill set together.
That was the really silly part of the dynamic. I think everybody starts, if they're lucky, like anyone who turns out good at skiing probably had like a mom or a dad or both who were like really good at skiing. Like, why else would you get your kid into it? We rolled the dice on this so hard. He hadn't skied in a long time, so we were beginners at this together. And it allowed us to get in and over our heads in some crazy ways. I remember taking snowmobile trails and getting lost in the woods and, freaking out because he thought he saw a cougar footprint. Like, those aren't even native to the Northeast, but we're having this like scary, like hour-long walk thinking we're being stalked by a cougar, like ending up in a creek, ending up getting separated in the woods, like all these like things were like really like we were epicing out there, and it led to some good stories. But there were sometimes, like for me, like trail maps and topos and things just like always make sense to me, and I feel like either they don't make sense to my dad or he doesn't like pay attention to them. So there was a lot of times where I knew where we were going and he didn't, and he would argue with me because he was so certain that there's no possible way that I could know where I was going. And it was like, oh man, those were the hardest days where I'm just like, I know we're going to the wrong lift right now and I just have to take it.
Just have to take direction from me, Dad.
Right. Dad has to be right. I was never right, unfortunately.
You get right. That's beautiful. Just to have that moment, and like we were saying before, that the mountains, the wilderness, they don't care from what background you've come from what learning style, that you can get on board with something, you can learn something from a very early age, or well into parenthood or adulthood. And the mountains don't care how much money you make or what psychological issues we all have, because we all have them, or what we're going through in our home life. It just takes us out in this space that I find it quite healing. I find it quite meditative, like it puts a focus on me, but also scales it back from all the outside world. Generally don't have cell reception, as you mentioned, with the maps and everything. You've got to kind of build that skill set and learn how to read a map and learn how to look at a compass. And gosh, I can remember a couple of years ago, I was without cell service. I got myself on this gnarly trail and they are all tagged with like little blue things on the trees and you've got to kind of look for them. They're like little cones on the rocks, and cell service is gone. I didn't have the map and all I had was this little blue dot where my car was that I'd parked hours ago, and I kind of had to like follow that back. And you work with what you got at the time, I think, and the information, and you tend to make decisions on the information that you got, and that can be in your home life, for your child, for your work life, everything. Rob, do you remember, obviously, you took Ryan to the ski hill and you've had this amazing experience. You've seen him light up. The light bulb's been turned on for you. That's actually a good little analogy, and I like to use it. It was obviously your turning point for him. But what was that moment where you're like, no, we need to somehow replicate this more in our everyday life, in our family life?
Yeah, no, I described that in the book. And then even when, you watched the documentary that we just worked on, I think there was this moment when I said, okay, he likes skiing. So what I have to do is just find activities that are like skiing in the summer and in the spring and the fall. And we'll just build around that. And it took me years later to realize, the Ryan that I saw skiing was the real Ryan. In the Ryan that I had created partially through my bad decisions as a parent, was this boy that was suffering from trauma and having, a lot of anxiety around being hurt by adults or not trusting adults. And that was the part I needed to fix. The rest, it wasn't that I needed to create, other risky activities. I just needed to let him be in charge of himself and to trust that he could make the right decisions. It's ironic what you talked about, being without cell service, or some of these places we were dangerous. I mean, if things had gone wrong or he had made a bad decision, especially when he would separate and he was really little. Yet when he was at school, he wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom alone. There was an aide that went with him, or to get a drink of water. And it's just, that was the part I needed to fix. And it took a long time, I think, to realize that, especially when you're in a special school and you've already decided your kid is different. Then the rules change, and it's like all the stuff they were doing was in an effort to help them. And I know they thought that, but really what I should have said is, and it took me a while to finally say it, is I see a much different kid than you do. I think nobody believed me because I was the only one who had seen that. And he was on a lot of medication too at the time. And when medication is in the mix, it's, oh, well, maybe it's the meds, or you're seeing, I'm saying, half the time when we're traveling, I don't even give him the meds. I'm, forgetting, or, maybe intentionally forgetting. Like, he's not being a good kid because of medication, and so we eventually got a therapist in the mix who saw it the way Ryan saw it and the way I saw it, and I think eventually my wife saw it, and we were all aligned. I think things got better, but it took way too long. And there's a lot of, you saw the film, I mean, there's a lot of guilt. I harbor a lot of guilt, and I tear up a lot when I talk about it still now, because I just regret all these decisions I made. And I got lucky, I think, because of skiing. He's carved out this wonderful life, and he's going places, and he's seeing the world and doing all kinds of great things. But this could have gone a different way. It could have gone to a really dark and terrible place, and I would have had to live with that. So I'm so thankful and grateful that we're not talking about that right now.
It could have. I sort of challenge people on this. They talk about time and, if I'd realized this sooner, this could have happened. But you two have shared this incredible experience. And I don't know how old you are now, Ryan, but like from 7 years old, like that's such a pivotal age for a child. It's when they start first grade, well, here in Australia, they start first grade of primary school. They start imprinting their learnings for teachings onwards. So you were so lucky and that to have that experience on that day on the mountain on the 2nd of January, because if it had happened any sooner or any later, I wouldn't be sat with you here today. You wouldn't have, the light bulb wouldn't have turned on for you and you wouldn't have had those moments together in order to share that. And I think the same goes for if you had been really experienced skier and you're like, Ryan, you should do this, you've got to go and do this. That wouldn't have been your passion. And you would have tried to be like, nah, Dad, I've got this. I want to go and do, I don't know, scuba diving or something else extreme. And it would have taken you off that a path that you're sharing together and the different avenues you've got to go down. And yeah, I think we do what we can with the information.
It's funny, nobody's ever pitched it to me like that. I never thought about like, oh, what if my dad was like an expert skier and like forced me to go skiing? Like, I feel like there was like a little hint of like defiance in me as a kid. Like there was a part of me that just like needed to show that I had autonomy and could go my own way. So that'd be kind of sad if like he tried to get me into skiing and I was like, no, I can't like skiing because you want me to like skiing. I have to like basket weaving. I'm kind of glad that I got to find skiing as the thing.
Well, when you got so good so fast, I remember people would say, "You're gonna put him in the racing program, or he's gonna be in the Olympics," and I just knew instinctively that would ruin it for him. Like that, the worst thing for him would have been to put him in the tight suit and have his life measured by hundredths of a second. Because this was the one freeing thing, and then to restrict it that way, and even one of the knocks I think on us, about the book or about Ryan's story, the undercurrent of, well, you had money, so you were able to fix this problem that he had. And I laugh because, it's not like he's living in Aspen right now at some high-end resort. He lives in a van. The skiing he likes to do is to climb the mountain himself, and then ski down, like in the middle of nowhere. This is not a kid living the lap of luxury. He's had, some advantages, I think, because we were able to try things, that if money was an object, it might have been harder. I'll admit that. But, this is not a kid who's coddled at all. He's made it so much harder than it had to be. If anything, he could be, it's someone in Chamonix right now as a guy probably living it up, but he's not.
Those like naysayers as well, like they're looking at a byproduct of years of hard work, emotional support from the family, from your good friends around you, from your partner Ryan, from your mum, from your sister. They're looking at it here. They're not looking at it where it was there. Money's got absolutely nothing to do with it. And my dad's a big believer in like the more money you have, it'll just amplify your feelings at the time. The same as if you've got a lot of support from your family, but no financial support. That'll just amplify your feelings of hurt, of disdain for them in that sense. Do you think, I find that we as society like struggle mentally, emotionally every single day at some point. I know I do. It's a little bit of a roller coaster. Do you think in identifying a passion, a pursuit, that you can not overcome them because they're always going to be there, but you can kind of steer them in the right direction?
Like I was just about to say, like that is the answer. I think in a lot of ways the story, it's a ski story because that's how it played out for me, but it didn't have to be a ski story. The key there was the passion. And in theory, the passion could be anything, right? If your passion is skiing, great. If your passion is like going to the park and playing basketball or making pottery or, running, like it can be anything as long as you're intrinsically motivated by it.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, so it's like, I think that people get caught up in that. Like the answer isn't like, oh, just like put your kid on some skis and everything's going to be okay. It's like, it's going to be different for every person. And the key is just that you find something that lights you up. If you have that, then you have all the ingredients.
And I think it was the power of the outdoors too, Jessye. He's an equally good rock climber, and that's not really part of our book because it wasn't really what he was doing at that point. And in the movie, obviously he's familiar with the ropes and things, but he's a great rock climber and just a hiker. Just loves being outside. And I think that for some people, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything other than just getting outside. And I think that just getting away from their phones and getting away from their pressure and just decompressing a little bit, and it could be bird watching, for God's sakes. I mean, anything that just takes you away from it helps. But if you're passionate about it and you love it, once he had this thing that he loved, life got a lot easier and it got a lot better. I can say that for certain. And he was so motivated to see new places. And skiing's funny like that. I mean, there was always another destination, and there was, every destination had a signature run, had the double black diamond run or the triple black diamond run. And now he's taken that to the backcountry. I think there's places. I mean, we've been to not only resorts like Japan, but we've been to Antarctica twice. I mean, how many people can say they've skied in Antarctica twice? I mean,
or Baffin Islands, I think I heard.
And he's been to Baffin, and Baffin is crazy. I mean, there's probably Ryan, how many? 20 people that have, I mean, how many people have
I don't know if you could count. I would guess like the number I would throw out there is 50. I could probably be wrong, but it's crazy because I was looking at some of these like photos from the first descents, and I'm pretty sure a lot of them are from 2001. Crazy enough, some of them might have happened on my birthday, because May is the time you are supposed to go there for best conditions. So the extent of skiing in Baffin Island has been around for pretty much exactly as long as I have. So there's only so many people who have been up there, because it's just such a hard place to get to and such an involved expedition. You need to fly all the way to Yellowknife and then fly in a small plane all the way to Clyde River. And then Clyde River is not like a town. It's a bunch of converted shipping containers that are only lived in by native people who eat most of their food through hunting. So you get there and you're just out on the ice and in this like micro town, and you pay to get snowmobiled just shy of like 100 miles or so out onto sea ice, and then they leave you there. We had one Inuit guide who stayed with us named Andy, and snowmobiled us around. But like, man, when all the other snowmobiles pull off and it's just you and your camp, and there's polar bear tracks out in the snow and such, like there's kind of a feeling like, wow, we're here right now. Nobody break your ankle. Like
that's a place that not many people will ever see. But I think, and you probably saw this in the film, Jess, that it's where he did all of these runs in New Hampshire. There's a small little town connected to it. I mean, the roads drive by these things every single day. And I think people probably go their whole lives driving by there and never knowing what goes on, just a few miles up and back, behind you. It's just that's the way the backcountry can be sometimes. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most remote place in the world. It's the combination of pitch, slope, aspects in the sun, and how the rocks formed from a glacier that moved through 1 million years ago. And you've either got a signature run that people like him will hike 5 hours in the hopes that they get there and the snow is good, and if it's not good, they'll turn around and come back. That there's crazy people like that out there in the world who will go find those places. And then there's the rest of us who will probably go our whole lives and never go to those places unless a helicopter takes us or makes it easy on us. But it's that kind of sport. It really is. It's up to you where you want to take it, and I think that's the part I like. I mean, you can go to a resort and have a great time and ski blue runs all day long. And,
you can, but you're probably going to, get back to your everyday life, and then,
still better, right?
It's not significant. It's not satiating it. And you mentioned something funny, like with having the mountains so close by to where you live. I mean, I lived up, the Great Barrier Reef for 14 years. I got out to the reef twice because I just got so ingrained in my work, in my Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It totally changed who I was as an individual for all those years. And then you kind of circle back to, your childhood, and you're like, this is what I was passionate about. This is what made me happy outside of work, outside of this. How can I make this happen every day? And Ryan, you mentioned like with being intrinsically motivated, and I love that word because someone said that to me years ago. They're like, you're very motivated from the inside, but you need that constant external inspiration to drive you on your next project, on your next ski run. Or what was that for you, do you think? did you have like a little mentor? You know, I have watched the documentary, which is coming out at the end of the year, I think. Were those, you know, the guy that wrote the book, 91, is it 91, President 91?
Presidential Skiing is the name of the book, but it has 91 routes in it.
Yeah, and you've done all of them, I think?
All of them as of March.
Was there a mentor out of that you took just a bit of direction, a bit of like, oh, wow, they're doing that? Or where does that come from?
I think everybody's a composite of their experiences. You have kind of your friends who you're doing stuff with. You have your idols, like people who are doing things that you think are really cool that you look up to, but you don't necessarily have like a lot of access to those people. And if you're lucky, you have a mentor, which is somebody that you idolize who knows you well enough and likes you well enough that they've sort of taken some interest in developing you. And I've had a lot of those people, and I shout them out whenever I can. You know, there's Ben Bristow from Big Sky, Brendan Lagasse from Lake Tahoe, who have both really put a lot of energy into me as a skier, me as a human, giving me advice and teaching me techniques to get out there into the mountains and be better at what I love to do. And then Andrew Drummond was a huge inspiration to me. He was kind of the first person to put the White Mountains on the map. So when I knew that I wanted to get into the backcountry and that was like the next thing for me as an adventure skier, as a steep skier, I found his videos and I was like, I never knew that there was this much to do in New Hampshire. I knew of Tuckerman Ravine because it's famous, but there's these 11 other ravines that are arguably harder, you know, more remote, have this like incredible terrain. And I was just like kind of ignorant to like how many gems were very close to me as a New Englander. And pretty much as soon as I had a car, I was up there as much as possible, you know, finding partners from Facebook, going solo, hiring guides if I could figure that out, like anything I could to be in those mountains doing things and learning. And, you know, it's like the intrinsic motivation. It's like there's the thing you love to do. Like you wake up in the morning and you want to go skiing, you want to go climbing, you see the mountains and you can't help but like look for, you know, weaknesses down them that you could ski or like cool features that you could climb. It just burns within you. And even if everybody in the world was like, oh man, skiing's lame, you'd still love it. But then I think the external motivation is like the goals, right? And the White Mountains is a place that's so rich with history and pretty well documented history in climbing and skiing, hiking. And so you're surrounded by all of these things that, you know, great athletes have done to contribute to this history. You know, you drive through Franconia Notch, you can see climbing routes on Cannon Cliff that have never been repeated, that are just waiting there, that are a 40-minute walk from the road. And, you know, like we talked about with sort of the mountains being indiscriminate, like, you know, you could be anybody. Like, you can't play in the NBA championships right now, but you can walk up to that mountain and you can put some gear on and you can try and climb it. Whether or not you're going to make it to the top, that's a different story. But there's no kind of like bureaucratic barrier of entry. You don't need to like make a team. You don't need to like sign a contract. You can just walk out there and do it. So I was always surrounded by this inspiration and kind of thinking, you know, like what could I do to honor and contribute to this lineage, you know, like how can I show up to these mountains and be the best athlete I can be in the spirit of all of these other athletes that have come before me. And when the guidebook for Mount Washington came out, because even though we were kind of the birthplace of American steep skiing, you know, Tuckerman Ravine in like the 30s and 40s, there was still never a definitive guidebook for the entire region. So when Kurt comes out with this guidebook, I was like, you know what? I bet I could ski all those lines. I don't know if I will, but I know if you guaranteed me that there will be a day with good stability and good conditions on every one of those lines and put me at the top, there's no line that I can't ski. So why don't I just try? And I put it out there that I was going to attempt to ski everything in this book. And, you know, it's small change compared to some of the other history that's been done, but it was definitely the greatest challenge that I've ever poured my life into. It took me 6 years. It took me a lot of remarkable, like indescribable good fortune with the weather. and it took a lot of hours and determination, a lot of personal risk, a lot of really good partners. But I did get it done and have managed to contribute a very small piece of history to the mountains of New England.
Well, you're contributing it all the way over to Australia. Like I was saying to Rob earlier, that I started watching the movie and I just started tearing up from the opening scenes. And for you to have that inspiration on such a humble level it's testament to your upbringing, to your parenthood, Rob. Like it just speaks volumes to who you are as a person. You know, there's people out there that, you know, have all these YouTube subscribers, and they're these amazing athletes that have had, you know, from the outside an incredible upbringing and this and that. They would have faced challenges themselves. But it's the up and comers, it's the people that do just do it with what they have, and they've got this plan, this project, this, as we said, intrinsically motivated to just keep going. I have no words for it. It's really beautiful message what you've got. Was that sort of the inspiration behind the book? To what sort of captivated that for you?
I think the book, was partially. I knew he'd started in a really terrible place and ended up in an okay place, and I suspected that, at the time, my wife and I were both attorneys. We had resources, and we made all of these terrible decisions. And I just thought of all of these parents that were probably, in a worse position than we were to start, and they probably, felt the same pressure we did when a teacher said you have to do this, or especially if a doctor said you should do this. And I knew that we could help people if we could just tell Ryan's story, because maybe somebody would get a glimmer of hope. And I didn't know if we'd ever get published. And I think, when I started writing, and Ryan started writing, and we looked at what each other wrote, I mean, I was so angry in what I wrote, and I was like, I was going to have revenge on everybody. And when Ryan read what I wrote, he said, I don't, that's not the story I want to tell. I'm okay. I ended up fine. Like, this shouldn't be your revenge tour, Dad. And then go back and try again. And so I went back, and I think I needed to process all that. I needed to, so it was really what I was masking was my own role and guilt in this whole thing. And the second time through, I think I finally just owned that and said, this was all my doing. I can blame them, but they wouldn't have been in that position had I not hired them, and we hadn't walked in the door of the doctor's office or gone to that school. So it really helped. It was cathartic for me. So I think the book was a little bit for us in the hopes of helping others. I think when I proposed the documentary to Ryan, at that point, the book was really in the rear view. The book ends with Ryan in high school. I mean, Ryan's, what are you, 24 now? 25? How old are you? 24?
20. I think you should know that.
No, well, you just turned 22.
My dad forgets too, don't worry.
So it all blends together. But the movie, I think we really wanted to be about the skiing. And what I think was interesting, and I don't want to speak for Ryan, but I think in the movie, I think Ryan had a similar experience that I had when I wrote, that I would write and I would find myself crying and tearing up while I was processing all of this emotion from what had happened. And I think in the film, although it was really about this amazing project that he did, and we really wanted to highlight that, I think he still had some unresolved issues with what had happened to him that, I wasn't fully aware that he was still dealing with. He's such an accomplished guy, and he's, I always say he's the most well-adjusted, 20 whatever something that I've ever met. I mean, it doesn't seem like he is struggling through a lot of this stuff, but obviously he was. And I hope the film was a chance for him to sort of process some of what happened in the past and put it to bed for good. And I maybe, I mean, you tell me, Ryan, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Do you know what, Ryan, before you go on, I just wanted to say that, and it's probably similar along the lines of the opening scene with you in the car and you're going out and climbing the tree. Quite often we put off what we need to process. So I know me and a lot of my friends and a lot of my family will go out to the mountains or they'll go skiing to avoid feeling the feelings. And it's not until years later that we might be faced with that situation. I know it's happened to me, others, that you're like, oh, wow, I am such an accomplished person. I've done all this work on myself, but there's still this thing in me that gets me so emotional, so upset. I don't know what it is. You know, they're long in the rearview mirror. They're long down the base of the mountain, but that we need to complete it in ourselves. And it brings us, it almost as if it brings us right back to that moment, and we're experiencing all over again, but with the information that we have on within us now. I don't know if it's the same for you.
It was a little bit of that. It was interesting because, like, I feel like I didn't necessarily know that that was in there. It was very interesting. Like, I would have told you prior to that I was like completely over everything that had happened to me. I was like, super well adjusted. Like, I didn't have this like, this darkness that was always catching up to me that I always had to be burying or running from or hiding from. Like, I went through my day-to-day life and, like, found a lot of joy. There's good days, there's bad days, there's, okay days, just kind of like how you always have. Um, and I had quite a lot of good days, and I was thinking, what, like, I think I'm good. And what happened, it was interesting because we really started the film. We want this to be about this ski story. I took a big chance in making it about the project because with it being so condition dependent, I wasn't even sure that I could finish it. But I really wanted to highlight it because it felt like it was like the biggest thing that I'd done in my life thus far, that I was doing and what I was most passionate about. And if there was going to be a movie about me, I wanted it to be about that. So I ski the last like big crux line successfully. We film it. I ski my finishing line, the one I saved for last. We film it. I eat like 40 something chicken wings to celebrate. And I thought that's where the story ended. We kind of submitted all of our footage and we're like, great, we did it. And they came to Massachusetts, the film crew, to film some like housekeeping stuff, just like, oh, we need to get this interview. We need to talk to, your mom and sister. We need to like, get some like B-roll from your house. And one of the things they wanted was like some shots of the hospital that I was in when I was 9. I was in a mental hospital for 2 weeks, and it was kind of like the low point of my life because I was only supposed to be there for a day. I thought I was abandoned there when I was there for the second day. I ended up being there for 2 weeks. I almost didn't get out. The state could have taken me. I ended up getting put on this medication that had this side effect that could have killed me. Like, there was all this stuff that was all this darkness that happened there. And they wanted to go back to the hospital. And I just found myself just getting so angry at the idea of going there. I just didn't want to go. And it was like, one of these things. And, Mark is the person who was filming me that day and is the person who's creating this film. He kind of put it into my hands and he's like, if you don't want to go, then don't. You don't have to go there for this movie. We can still have a good movie without you going there. And I don't know if he meant to do this, but that was kind of genius because it put it into my hands all of a sudden where I'm like, okay, if I'm deciding, we can go or not go. It's not Mark saying we need you to do this because it's a good movie. Why do I want to say no? It's not like I'm going back to the hospital to stay there. Why do I want to say no? And it just like, that was what you were seeing in the car is I was like so frustrated with myself as I'm like, why do I care? It's been so long. They can't hurt me anymore. Why? And I was just like digging for that answer. And I ended up crying up in the tree thinking about it because I'm like, maybe I'm not as over this as I thought I was. Like, what haven't I released yet? And I kind of realized when we went back there, it was like not so much that it really like that the scar of this specific thing ran that deep. It was like a lot of just like ever since then, I feel like I've been on the run. It's like I got out of the hospital and then I was supposed to go to this other program. We didn't go. We went to go skiing. And then since then, it's just been like working up and up through skiing and like battling to get out of these schools and, finally getting into a school and then aging out of it and going into a school that was worse. And then like getting so bad I wanted to drop out that I moved to this other program, work really hard to go back to public. And I finally settle into public and it's great. But then I graduate and now I'm in college and I'm trying to make friends. I'm trying to learn how to be a human. I'm trying to get a degree. And it felt like I was just constantly going to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing that I never taken my jacket off. That's the best way to describe it. I'd never like looked back on that experience and been like, I'm safe now. This thing happened, but it's not happening anymore. And I don't need to try so hard to put this thing in the past. And I think that that was, every interview I did about the book, everything, I always was so angry that I was like talking about my past. I just wanted to talk about the present. I just want to talk about what I was doing now. And I realized that there was a part of me that really did want to pretend this never happened. There was a part of me that wanted to close the chapter and just let it die. And I realized that I can't, it no matter what, it's a part of me. And even if it's not a part of me now in terms of my everyday life, it still shaped me. It's not this irrelevant thing that I can just cut off of me. It's always going to be intertwined with my story, with, my personality, like who I am now. And the only way to deal with that is to just stop and take a breath and realize I am safe now. That part of the journey is over, but it's still a brick in the wall, and I can't pretend it's not a brick in the wall.
Just like a poet, you just captured that message so brilliantly, to the point that it's still a part of who you are, but that you've completed that lesson, you've felt the feelings, you've understood what that emotion meant. And I dare say, like, it will probably traject you forward in what you need to do next, or what you're going to do next with this whole project. Just when we were talking, and the documentary, and the way that the education systems are, and I know they're different, schools, medical here in Australia versus in the States, but I could already see that being adopted into schools and medical, to understand the psyche of kids, of adults who may think that they're processing these things and being streamlined down one route to get through school, to get through a degree, and then having these major life turning points, as we say, these midlife crises, and not understanding where that all comes from. I think that could just be implemented into schools. We'd all be a lot better off. Tell me, like, Ryan, what's the hope for the future out of this? Like, you say that you into a bit of rock climbing and stuff and mountain guiding. Where do you see this growing outside the van?
Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like I have my fingers in a lot of pies. Like, I'm kind of like trying to develop as a guide. I'm trying to like sort of build like this social media platform and sort of like get out there for like the things I'm doing on like the athlete side of things. And then I also have this book, and then I also have this film. And I hope the film more than anything, I have a lot of hopes for it. I hope one thing it does is it sort of, breaks a new barrier on sort of athletes and mental health. And I think having the book is fantastic, but people have to read it, and not everybody has the time or the energy or the want even to sit down and read a book. But a lot of people will watch a film. And I think just like seeing like, okay, like you can go through all of this stuff and you can be in the mental health world and still overcome and still accomplish great things. And I think that it's great because I thought I was so alone in this, and I also thought I wasn't going to be understood for this. I think it's much easier to grasp, like, okay, like, person grows up, in poverty and like builds themselves up for nothing, and now they're the CEO of this company. I feel like that story in America is like very celebrated, and maybe in other parts of the world too. But like, going through like the special education system and having this weird thing happen with like restraints and like misuse of force and abuse, and just like the psychological scars of that, like I feel like that's like a weird thing, and I always thought people would outcast me for that. So I think like putting more eyes on that as like a thing that happens every day. And to a lot of people, I was surprised how many people were like, oh, my sister went to those schools, my brother, my uncle, like so many people had been through that experience, but just didn't have a framework for it or anyone that they could talk to because they felt like they were alone. And to not only see that, but to see that like, one of those people like made it out into the world and did this thing. Also, just on the ski perspective, this is a smaller thing, compared to that. But just for the East Coast, I feel like our backcountry scene is so special. With what my dad was talking about, of people who will, go up into these mountains and climb these snow gullies to like, deal with these really challenging conditions and, maybe ski something. There's so much passion and so much grit in this community. And, we don't have the best conditions in the world. The Northeast can be such a fickle place to ski, but it can be really spectacular. And if the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. And I think we've had this terrain be captured on film before with the stuff that like, Meathead Films did back in the day, or like Working for the Weekend, the YouTube videos that like Andrew Drummond made. And there's been like bigger ski films, but I feel like this is like the next evolution, is like a feet on the ground, like an athlete story based in the Northeast and based on like the backcountry ski scene in these mountains. Because like it's my story, it's very uniquely my story, but it's an East Coast story. It's a thing that is very much centered around the Mount Washington Valley ski scene, and is going to like really shed light on like what real people feet on the ground are doing in this range every day, me just being one of them, and what magical terrain we have, what these efforts are, like why people stay out here, and to contribute that to the culture, to have another, potentially widespread piece of ski media that I hope becomes iconic for the Northeast, is like, that feels good. Like, I like that I can contribute that to the culture.
It's already iconic. You're never gonna reach everyone anywhere on any one platform. But you know what? Like having these podcasts, and even having, if I didn't have visual on your documentary, I still would have resonated with the message. I still would have got emotional hearing you speak about it, because I'm the biggest believer in that's how we captivate someone. That's how we connect with someone. And it doesn't have to be every piece of your story, Ryan, like, or yours, Rob. But there might be a family out there that'll be like, oh gosh, I'm exactly like Rob, or I'm going down this route, and just one little piece, one little sentence of your book, one little 10-second audio clip of our interview will just somehow resonate with someone. Yeah. And they'll be like, I want to learn more. I want to go into, the backcountry skiing. I want to do that I can be like them. They're my mentor now. They're my, person that I look up to, that I admire. Rob, and I'm sort of getting towards the end of my questions, but what's been your inspiration throughout this whole journey?
I'd say Ryan has been my inspiration, but I think also I've had a different look at the outdoors as well. I think, and I've seen some really amazing places, but one of the best parts of that is the people I've met along the way. I say this a lot, that adult male friendship is very rare. Like as adult, I don't know if it's like this in Australia, but in America, guys tend to carry through life their high school buddies. And I have some great high school friends. Don't get me wrong, I love my high school friends. We're reluctant to bring new people into the fold, I think. And so through skiing, I really met this collection of guys who are, dads, or even if they're not dads, we just we have a great time, and we push each other, and maybe they're always a little better than me at the skiing part. And I've met some really, really amazing people, and it's opened up a whole world for me. It really has, of not just places to go, but people to go to those places with. And I've been so fortunate, I think, that in that respect. And it's all really thanks to him. And we have a lot of the same friends, and some of those guys have kids they're his age, and it's a family thing, and it's been pretty special. So that's been the best part for me.
It kind of transcends age, doesn't it? Age, ability, everything. You can have someone out there that's a world pro skier, or someone that's just starting out. And I find that the greats, the people that have really honed their craft, they're really humble about how they got there and how they began, and what sparked the spark of inspiration for them. And they just want to teach it. They want to. They're so passionate about it. It lights them up. You can see a smile and one of the things I say about audio is you can hear the emotion. You can almost see that they're smiling on a video, and it's really
some of the
way to go
best,
about
the best backcountry skiers, I think, are you'd never know them. I think because their world is somewhat limited. But even God, I'm blanking on her name. Who is the Australian snowboarder in Antarctica? Right.
See, now
Tora?
that you put me on the Tora Bright.
Right. God,
Do you know why I know that? I did
why
a
do you
bit
know
of
that?
a pre-Instagram stalking of who follows you.
That's so silly.
Pretty, I'm sure, huge, and she was delightful.
Yeah.
I mean, she couldn't have been sweeter, and like not an attitude at all. And this is, she was at the
She's a sweetheart, and actually, she was sponsored by Colgate. That's how it all sort of came about, and then she was a household name through the Olympics and everything. Yep. And it's funny you say that because I find a lot more athletes easier to reach in this medium as well. So like part of my sort of job is getting athletes, getting people from everyday sort of life to come on my show, and I'll just reach out to them through this social media, and they're like, yeah, of course, we'd love to give you time and talk and come on. And we think that that's a way to resonate with the community and keep this experience going, like keep the learning going, and the level of involvement that's just going to keep going onwards and up from there.
Like you said, you could be sitting next to a chairlift next to a billionaire or some guy who had to cobble together, the day pass somehow. Like, it's the same sport, I think when you're a professional athlete, version of football or our version of football, and you're recognizable everywhere you go, that's a different world, right? But for a lot of these guys, even the Olympic athlete types, they're pretty anonymous in most of their lives, and I think on the mountain, especially if you have a helmet and goggles on, you could be anybody. And I think it's still the same act of having to get down the hill, or in Ryan's case, having to get up the hill to get down the hill. And I think that's, I don't know, there's a equality in that, I guess.
I have a thought on this, and I'm not a world-renowned professional athlete, so I don't know if I ever become one, maybe I'll have a different answer. But I don't know, some of the things these 14-year-old kids are doing, I'm kind of like, I feel like if I was going to be a world-renowned professional athlete, I would have known by now. The thing I notice in terms of working on my own goals and stuff is the beautiful thing about the mountains is the more you apply yourself to them, the more things that you used to find unfathomable suddenly become realistic. So it's kind of I feel like when I started out, I had an idea of this particular climbing route, or this particular ski line, this is something only the best of the best can do, and the people who do that thing must be just on a completely different level. And then you work up to doing some of those things, and ultimately you're still you might you develop more self-confidence, you develop more athletic ability, you have sort of more tools in the toolkit, you evolve as a person and as an athlete through those experiences. But at the end of the day, all of the core traits about you are going to remain the same. And so it's after I've done one of these things that I used to hold on this pedestal, and I'm still the person that tried to take my magnesium supplement alone in my van, didn't have any water, accidentally got it stuck in my throat, turned the sink on to try and drink it, forgot that I hadn't turned the pump on, turned the pump on, forgot my water comes out at 135 degrees, and then burned my face off. If that can be me on a random Friday, and I can send that route, then foreseeably anyone in the world can do that. And I think that the people who are professional athletes, I would imagine that a lot of them are very humble because they also see themselves as just being people who worked hard at something, not anything less or anything more. It doesn't make them superhuman or special to get where they are. They just worked really hard to do that. So I think they see other people as being equally capable of that potential. Because everybody I've met who hasn't reached certain heights yet talks about the people who have reached those heights as though they're gods. And everybody who has reached heights that I could only ever dream of, they'll be like, oh, I bet if you put a season into that, you could probably do it. I'm like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? But, that was once them. So that's my theory. And I think that's a pretty inspirational note to leave that on of Just apply yourself.
100%. It was going to be my next question. If you could have one piece of advice to give to anybody out there, whatever they're struggling with at any 1 minute, whether it's everyday life, at school, parenthood, in the family, or sports, just one little thing, what would that be?
I think more than anything, you just kind of have to maintain the belief that like what's coming in the future could be better than you imagined, and don't discount yourself from anything before you've tried it. The more you put energy into what you're passionate about, or really anything you want to work on, eventually you can find success and find other people who are like-minded, who are trying to go where you're going. You know, like everything tends to align once you align with like what's like really important to you and what you want to be doing and what lights you up. And that doesn't mean every single day is going to be easy. It's not going to be like a yellow brick road to where you want to go. There'll still be challenges, but when you're in alignment with what is really important to you, as opposed to out of alignment, the difference is very palpable.
And Rob?
Yeah, I would say on the parenting side, you know your kid better than anybody. And I think I was, easily led sometimes by someone who I thought had more experience or more pedigree, or, especially when it's medicine, if it's intimidating to, you assume a doctor knows more than you do. When it comes to mental health, this isn't a broken leg we're talking about. 4-year-old's brain, nobody knows what they're talking about. And if you know your son or daughter, trust your gut on that, trust your instincts. That's one. Two, I think finding a passion or finding something that they're motivated to do outside of this world we've created, this virtual world and this phone world. I mean, I think it's, especially as they get into the preteen years and teen years, it's a really dark hole they can go down, and it's just not healthy, I think, to be on a device all this time. I think getting outside is a good thing. And then lastly, I'll sort of touch on what Ryan touched on. Everything's as important as the moment it happened, and it's magnified, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And the worst thing that ever happened to you will seem not so bad 5 years from now, and the best thing that ever happened to you will seem not such a big deal 5 years from now. Sometimes you just need the passage of time and to get to the next day and allow things to get better. And I think that was for us. There were plenty of times we could have given up along the way, and Ryan would be in a much different place. All of those failed sports we tried and all of those failed things we tried led eventually to skiing, but we had to have those failures to get there. And sometimes you're going to have that as a parent, especially. I think there's going to be some days where you just think this will never get better, or this will be so, this is it. He didn't get into this school, or this, whatever, didn't pass this thing. And now the die is cast, it's the future. It's never that way. There's always tomorrow. Tomorrow's always going to be good. You just have to believe that.
Tomorrow's another day. And last thing, when does the movie documentary release for us?
So that's a really good question. Right now, we submitted to a bunch of film festivals, and we've submitted to some of the big ones like Sundance, which you may have heard of, and then a lot of them, luckily, are built around sort of ski resorts and the outdoors. So we're waiting to see where we get in. I think that will debut at one of those festivals, hopefully, and then from there, if there's interest in a longer project, or somebody wants to sponsor Ryan to maybe go back to Baffin and add to have a series, or so, we'll see where it goes. Worst case, it'll be on YouTube a year from now, or a few months from now, if that's what. And we'll start spreading the word if it is. But you've seen it, so you can attest to it.
I'm gonna go and watch it.
It's great. I've watched it a number of times.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys. We might sort of wrap it up there, and thank you for skiing on over to Australia, so to speak. I'd love to catch up with you again down the line, but
we'd like that.
It's been great having you on.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I like how you say skiing down to Australia too, because that's another continent that we haven't been to yet.
It is.
And I know there is skiing there. I saw a great presentation for some of these ski patrols there, so maybe we'll make some turns together. Thanks for having us on.
I would love that. Thanks, guys.
All right.
See you.
Good night.
Bye.
The musical intro and outro is produced by Ornate Mosh. Interested in your own unique jingle? Connect via the link in the About section of this podcast. Thank you. You have been listening to You Are the Compass, produced and hosted by Jessye Clayton.